I decided to continue my review of Alyssa Childers' interview with Krista Bontrager, the theology mom. And they're talking about how Biola University has now become this terrible woke institution that will lead your children astray and down the garden path of destruction to progressive Christianity and social justice and critical race theory, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty dire situation, apparently. In this video, we're going to watch one clip. And in this clip, Theology Mom is going to talk about how parents keep contacting her, telling her how Biola University has destroyed their children's faith and led them to deconstruct and to apparently become gay and to become alienated from their parents. So we're going to watch this clip and then I'm going to have some thoughts on the other side.
And to your point earlier about the parents, I have received many letters as well from brokenhearted parents. I received one letter, I think it was last week or the week before, from a dad. He sent 3 of his 4 children to Biola. All 3 of them have deconstructed.
Yeah.
And I think 2 of them are queer now. And
What? So Biola University makes kids queer? I mean, what is this woman talking about? She says 2 of them are queer now. You better be pretty clear on what kind of allegations you're making, because I'll tell you, it sure sounds like what you're saying is if you send your kids to Biola, be careful because they might come out gay. And that's, of course, a pretty insane allegation to make. What may have happened is that a child went to Biola University and they were in fact gay. And at some point in their education or after that, they finally come out to their parents, and their parents say it must be Biola University's fault that my child is gay. Biola made them gay. And so Von Traeger warns 2 of these children, 2 out of 3, went to Biola and then became queer. And then she talks about sorry, my dog's barking. She talks about deconstruction. I would love for these people to define what you mean by deconstruction, because I have a good idea what it probably means is something like my child went to Biola and now they accept that evolution is true. And they accept that you could be a Christian and vote for a Democrat. And of course, that's deconstruction according to these people. So you better not send your kids to Biola. All right, let's watch a little bit more of the clip. First of all, I'm going to shut my dog up and then we'll take a look at the rest of the clip. First of all, so this is Timbit, right? He's repeatedly interrupting me, barking, looking out the window. I shouldn't blame him because he is a Lhasa Apso, and it is in his genes to be a sentinel, to be offer early warnings for intruders into the Tibetan monasteries where they were originally bred hundreds of years ago. And so this clown keeps bringing that into my podcasts and interrupting them, but it's just his DNA. So I guess I can't be that mad at him. Okay, now we're going to go back to Theology Mom blaming Biola University for children having unhappy relationships with their parents.
and I can't put these people on a podcast. People are like, well, prove your allegations, prove
Yeah.
the implications of this. But these people are crushed.
Yeah.
They are traumatized. They spent $200,000 on their kids' education, and their kids don't, in some cases, no longer even communicate with them.
Okay, so you have a bad relationship with your kid. Obviously, it must be Biola University's fault. I mean, this is so ridiculous. Look, a Christian university is not going to guarantee that you're going to have a good relationship with your kid. It's not going to guarantee that your kid will retain your deeply entrenched insular fundamentalist theology. Your kid actually might grow and develop their own theological views through the process of their education. If you really want them to be indoctrinated, why don't you just start a compound in the desert, like in Waco, Texas, with the Branch Davidians? You can keep all your kids in the compound there, and indoctrinate them however you like. But if you actually want them to have an education and to develop their own minds and be able to think for themselves and develop their own theological views, which may not align with your views of creationism and Republican MAGA uh, political convictions and being pro-life and being anti-evolution and anti-gay. If you don't want that, well, yeah, then you're probably going to be disappointed if you send them to an institution that allows them actually to develop their own ideas and think. But of course, there's also here something fundamental about the post hoc fallacy, that just because one thing occurred after another thing, it doesn't mean the earlier in the chronological sequence caused the other thing. So, for example, just because, let's say, you turn on your television and a moment later you hear an explosion in the neighborhood, it doesn't follow that your television being turned on caused the explosion in the neighborhood. Just because your kid goes to university and then deconstructs, whatever that means, doesn't follow that the deconstruction was caused by going to university. Maybe it was caused by the fact that your child just has developed and moved away and began to think for themselves. I mean, how common is it for children, once they leave the nest, quote unquote, go off and live on their own, they begin to assert their own autonomy, develop their own views, think for themselves, and it's not necessarily going to align with the parents. It doesn't follow that it's the fault of the university that they happen to be going to at the time.
And because they've been discipled to believe that their parents are racist and homophobes and all kinds of stuff in the name of Jesus, I can't put these people on a podcast. They are reeling, they are trying to just figure out what in the world happened to break up their family. And so it's
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. I remember this when I went to university and I came back and had debates with my dad, my arguing to my father that he was a supersessionist in his view of the relationship between Israel and the church, and that was deeply anti-Semitic and anti-Judaic, and he needed to get rid of his supersessionist theology. And he's probably thinking, what the hell is this kid even talking about? And we had all sorts of other debates similar to that. Uh, I mean, my mom particularly was Pentecostal in theology, go off to university, take a course in charismatic Christianity. And that really helped to deconstruct my Pentecostal understanding of the book of Acts and the Pentecostal reading of 1 Corinthians 12 to 14 in particular, and other passages in the Pauline epistles on spiritual gifts. So I came back with all these criticisms of Pentecostal theology. Well, my mother was not an ideologue. However, she wasn't threatened by that. But I can definitely imagine a crusty old Pentecostal pastor thinking, "What happened to my kid? They've deconstructed from their Pentecostal theology by going off to university, and so it must be the university's fault that made my child a non-Pentecostal or non-cessationist, supersessionist, I should say, in their theology of Israel and the church." Endless examples like that. Of course, seminary, same thing. I actually grew up and realized creationism is not, well, first of all, that a theistic evolutionary account or evolutionary creationist account is certainly a preferable account, but then recognizing how, in fact, young earth creationism is a deeply aberrant account, and an idiosyncrasy of the 20th century fundamentalist movement born out of um, really going back to the George McCready Price, who popularized the teachings of Ellen White, Seventh-day Adventist prophecies about how to interpret the Bible, and so on. So all of this, to a fundamentalist, that would be deconstruction, and you'd blame the university for this child actually having grown up and moved from milk to solid food. And here you have a couple of ideologues in this Theology Mom and Alyssa Childers, purveyors of disinformation and misinformation, who are threatened by a university that, in some respect, might challenge the hegemony of their fundamentalist indoctrination. So, what they want to do is to steer you away from Biola University, blame Biola for you having a bad relationship with your kids or for your kids deconstructing, meaning they have begun to question maybe aspects of your theology, and even blaming your kids, suggesting that Biola makes them gay. So that is the kind of irresponsible screed you're getting. Now, I'm not nearly done with this podcast interview. It's just brutal. And we're going to look at some other clips in at least one or two videos to come. So stay tuned.